In this video, we're going to go through a set of data from the assignment on Tuesday. Hopefully you'll see the process it takes to go through these types of analysis are not challenging and they can be done very quickly. So here are the goals we want to accomplish. First, we're going to look at a set of data and we're going to state a frame of reference. And then we're going to go through each of the graphs. It will be relatively quick because this is, like I said, stuff we've done in class. It should be very easy to accomplish. And then maybe I'll walk through a couple of analyses as I talk about some graphs, and then should be good. So first, a frame of reference. The data that I'm looking at today is retirement funds, and some of you have probably used this data for your own analysis or are planning to at the time of this video is being recorded. So I'm going to look at this data from the frame of reference as a middle-aged investor looking to build funds for my kids. I have two kids. One of them's in 8th grade, one of them's in 9th grade. And so that frame of reference is going to guide which variables I pick. In fact, I'm worried about a 3-year return because my son is going to be starting college after 3 years. So if I'm going to invest, that would be the 3-year return rate is what I'd be looking for. And my daughter would be going a little bit after that. So we'll do a 5-year return rate. Those are the two variables that I find interesting in terms of length of investment time. The other thing that's important is risk, as well as the market cap. If it's a big fund, I have more confidence that it's going to be a good investment. And I'm also concerned about the quality of the fund. And there's some other things that might be important too, but for my frame of reference, those are the variables that I think are valuable. So I'm just going to highlight those so we will remember what they are. Okay, so those are my variables. I should say that another variable that will help guide my choice of a fund would be the 1-year return, because as it relates to 3-year and 5-year returns, the most recent data may suggest things about the future, not just the past. So is there a relationship between 1-year and 3-year funds and 1-year and 5-year funds? So I'll highlight that as well so that I can use that in my analysis. So those are the data sets, variables that I find interesting based on my frame of reference. And so now we're going to go through the process and build some graphs. Okay, first is a bar chart. So for bar chart, pie chart, contingency table, when we're looking at these categorical variables, specifically market cap, risk, and star rating, I really can get to those graphs quickly using a pivot table, which we've done in class. So I'm just going to insert a pivot table, make sure it's highlighted everything, and I come to the pivot table screen. All right, so market cap was one of the ones that I thought was interesting. So I'm going to drag it down to rows. I'm going to drag market cap down to values, and I get a count of the funds really quickly. And without even doing much work at all, I can now hit pivot table analyze and a pivot chart and click OK. And I've got a bar chart for count of funds by market cap. Okay. So there is a bar chart. Now to move quickly through this, I can highlight all of the pivot table I just made, use Control-C, shortcut key to copy, and then click down below and click Control-V and paste that pivot table again. It still looks at the same data from the previous group, and as I change this one, it's not going to affect the graph up above. So new pivot table, new graph. Now we're going to make a pie chart because that's something that I said you ought to try to make. And in this case, I'm going to take, having selected the table down here, I'm going to remove market cap, remove count of market cap, and I'm going to include risk instead, since that was an important component. So risk is going to go to risk count, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to change this summarize values by, summarize, show values as percent of grand total. Okay, and it gives me a percentage, and then what I'm going to do once I've got percentages is I'm going to insert another pivot chart, this time a pie chart, and hit OK. Now I've got a pie chart. Okay, so this is pie chart for funds by risk rating. Gotta be careful, make sure all our letters are the same size. So now I've got bar chart and a pie chart. All right, so that's pretty slick. The next thing I need is a Pareto chart. And a Pareto chart is a form of bar chart that includes some additional analysis. And so as I said, star rating is important. So I'm going to make a copy of the pivot table, Control C, click Control V to paste. And I'm going to do, as I did before, remove risk from both of those areas on the bottom right. And then I'm going to drag star rating down. But because it's a Pareto chart, I'm going to need a count and a percentage. So I'm going to drag star rating twice into the values area in the bottom right. Right? And now I'm going to right click in the right column in the pivot table and show values as percent running total in. And hit OK. And now I can do a pivot table graph. I'm going to choose a combo chart and make sure that the line for the star rating percentage, cumulative percentage, is on the secondary axis. All right. Now it's not done yet because I don't have it sorted the right way. So I'm going to right click under the first column of numbers, sort by largest to smallest. And now I've got a Pareto chart for star ratings, which we did this in class. So it's not new to you. But those are three graphs that are interesting. And the fourth thing for categorical variables that we wanted to do, which is a multi-category bar chart. So the best way to do that is to, again, make a copy of a pivot table, paste it, and I want to include star rating, but I'm going to remove the count out for now, and I want star rating by risk levels. So I'm going to drag risk into the columns area. So when I'm making a two-way or a multi-category bar chart, I need one column set for each of the variables, either columns or rows actually. And then I can drag either risk or star rating into the values area to get a count. And we could use counts or percentages here. My personal preference is to right click in the table area and show values as percent of column total. So then this percentage here is that 53% of high risk funds are 1-star rating funds. So that's just one way to interpret it. Now to make a bar chart, I click in there, I go to pivot table, pivot chart, and I can hit OK. Let's do a horizontal version just because. And I can see a multi-category bar chart where the colors represent risk and each of the star ratings are given down the side. And if we wanted to, we could sort these. If I click here and go to the edge, I can sort that so that 1 comes first, and then 2, and then 3, and 4 and 5. So it's in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Anyway, multi-category bar, we did the first 4. And now we're going to go to look at the numerical variables in a different sheet, because I shouldn't use pivot tables with numerical variables, generally speaking. So we're going to go back to the data now, and I'm going to make a copy of my numerical variables and move them to a new sheet. I'm going to make a copy of all of those columns actually. Control copy, start a new sheet, and paste them. All right, so I've got some numerical variables now. We want to first make a histogram, and a good one to make a histogram would be the 3-year return, because I'm concerned that the funds I put into place, I want to pick a group that has good 3-year return rate so that the funds I put in for my son's college will be well invested. So the easiest way in Excel to build a histogram, I can just click on this column. I can go to the Insert tab and choose a histogram. It's not rocket science. I just have to make sure this is labeled 3-year return rates. That one's done, the histogram. I can even call it a histogram. All right. I could also use the built-in data tool to build a histogram. The data analysis tab. The data tab has the data analysis tool. We talked about adding that in class. You could use that approach. You could also build your own bins. These ranges down here, 0.07 to 1.77 and so forth. Those bins are easily built if there's a lot of data. But sometimes if there's only 20 rows of data, we have to build our own bins. But I'm not going to go through that in this video because this gives us a histogram. Okay. The other thing I'm interested in is a box plot, because I think a box plot is actually a better way to review a particular data set. So I'm going to choose 5-year return, and I'm going to get a box plot. So I'm going to go to Insert. Again, where these blue bars are, I can click down and choose box and whisker, and I can get a box and whisker chart for 5-year returns. I can see the min and the max. I can tell you what the middle 50% returns were, but there is my box plot. Now, in my personal opinion, I think a box plot is better used when you're comparing multiple categories of a numerical variable. So, for instance, we have star rating, we have risk, we have market cap. How does 5-year return rate look for each of those categories? Well, if I click 2 columns and insert, I don't know if this is going to work, insert a box plot, it doesn't work because they're not in the right order. So I've got to put star rating. Let's just cut this. Cut. We'll paste it in front of it because we want the category first and then the numerical data. Also, I don't want to include the headings. So I'm going to go 1 row below, and I'm going to highlight all of the data. And then I'm going to insert a box plot, and it gives me the 5-year return by star rating. And I'm just going to list this here. 5-year return by star rating. And if I was going to line these up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you would see that 1 is the lowest return, 2 is the next lowest, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. So the 5-year return is based on, or the star rating is based on 5-year return, at least in part. But the box plot in this format allows me to make comparisons much more easily. And you saw how quick we did it in Excel. It's just drag, point, and click, and it builds it for you. So again, not a challenging graph. Okay. The next thing we want to look at is a scatter plot. And so the two variables I'm going to include is going to be the 1-year return versus 3-year return and versus 5-year return. So basically, how does 1-year return correlate with 3-year returns? Okay, so I'm going to highlight these. In fact, it may help if I remind you that the first column is always X, the next column is always Y in Excel. So again, I want X and Y. So I'm going to highlight those two columns. I'm going to insert Scatterplot, and I can see it always puts the Y-axis label at the top. So I'm going to put 3-year return versus, and I'll just label that really quick. 3-year return is my Y versus 1-year return percentage, which is the X-axis. And you can see we've built a scatter plot. I'm just going to move this up so it's by the other ones. So it's up here with the rest. And we have successfully built all the charts. And I'm sitting here explaining it to you, and it's taken me maybe 15 minutes. So I think a lot of people were really stressed about this particular assignment, and I'm a little confused by it because it was very simple. We did all these things in class, right? The next thing that we'd have to do is now build the statistics that goes with each of these things. Okay, so I'm going to do that next. So let's go back to this chart. So going to our previous slide, we want to now compute statistics for for each of these graphs that we've already done. So going back to the categorical variables, in each of the pivot tables that we built, it's already calculated the statistics that we need. So no additional work is usually required with categorical variables because it gives us the numbers, and the numbers are based on what we make the graph. So the statistics are done. For the numerical variables, we can pull some statistics very quickly. I think I showed you how to get the descriptive statistics, but I'm going to walk through that really quick here. Data analysis. And clicking on the data analysis tool allows me to open up the descriptive statistics dialog box. And since we did a histogram for 3-year return rates, we're just going to input that data. And I did select the label, so I want to make sure I choose labels in the first row. In the output range, I'm going to put it in the cell right next to the histogram. That's going to be my output range for the descriptive statistics, and I have to make sure I check summary statistics. And one of the things that I generally do when I'm doing this is also a confidence interval or confidence level. I'm just going to include that just because it's a good habit too. As you'll see in chapter 8, we're going to be building confidence intervals. But you don't have to worry about that right now, but I'm going to put it in there anyways. So, okay. And it's just spit out all the statistics I could ever want about 3-year return rates. Mean, standard deviation, median, mode, and so forth. So that's going to give me the stuff I need for the other one. 5-year return rating, I'm going to need the quartiles. And like we did in class, I'm going to click up here, choose an auto filter option, and I'm going to sort by star rating, A to Z. Once I've sorted these star ratings, I can then pull the quartiles I want so that I can explain what's going on with these different star ratings in terms of quartiles. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to type quartile, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And up here I'm going to do star rating. And this is 5, 4, 1, 3, 2. Because that's the same order that it's showing up in my sort. So it'll be easy to find them. All right, and so I'm going to do equals quartile dot inclusive, and my array, I'm going to include all the star ratings that are 5 only. F4, and the quartile is there. Okay, so what I've done is I've only chosen the 5-star rating 3-year return rates. And then I choose the quartile number I picked here, 0, and that's going to give me the minimum. I'm going to drag that down. It's going to get me all those values. The next step is to do this for each of the next 4 of them. I'll do one more and then I'll just skip ahead to the work I already did. So 4, I want to choose just the 4-star funds. There it is. Again, I'm going to use an absolute reference, F4. So when I copy this down, it always keeps the array around the same reference. And quartile 0. All right, and you do the same thing for each of them. So that's where we've gotten to, is we've got the quartiles and the basic statistics for both box plots and histograms. What we haven't done yet are the outliers for each of these groups. Okay, so to get the outliers, let's take the histogram approach. So the histogram, it looks like there's some outliers on the upper end and maybe on the lower end as well. So how do I compute outliers? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a column next to 5-year returns. Actually, we want to do 3-year returns, don't we? 3-year returns. So I'm going to put a column next to 3-year returns. Just insert a column. Should shift everything. And this column I'm going to call z-scores. And we're looking for z-scores less than -3, more than +3. So I'm going to compute a z-score this way. Equals parenthesis my value that I'm computing a z-score for minus the mean, which we have over here on the right. So minus the mean divided by standard deviation, which is right here. And that gives me the z-score for this value. Now I'm going to copy this equation down, so I want to make sure I use an absolute reference on the standard deviation. Just can use F4 to quickly do that, and also an absolute reference on the mean. Hit enter, copy downwards, and I can get all the z-scores that are there. But what I want to do is I want to highlight the ones that are smaller than -3 and greater than +3. So I'm going to go to my home tab, and with the z-score still highlighted, I'm going to do something called conditional formatting. And I'm going to highlight cell rules. Let's see, highlight cell rules, and I'm going to see less than. So formatting cells that are less than -3, light red filled with dark red text. Okay. So that's one rule. And if I scroll down, I should be able to see my outliers very easily. There's a -3, so that one's an outlier on the low end, and that could be the only one. All right, now let's look at the upper end. I don't know if there will be any, but we're going to still calculate it. So still have it highlighted. I'm going to go to Conditional Formatting and highlight a cell rule for cells greater than. And I want it to be greater than +3. And hit OK. So now it'll be red if it's greater than 3. There's an outlier there that's greater than 3. And there's one that's less than 3. And so it looks like, oh, there's some more outliers. But that's how I would compute outliers in that case. All right. Now, we've computed outliers. We've computed z-score. We also need to compute coefficient of variation. So for 3-year return, coefficient of variation, let's just move these things down a little bit. Coefficient of variation is the mean divided by the standard, the standard deviation divided by the mean. So that's going to equal the standard deviation divided by the mean. Enter. And that's going to be a percentage. So I'll convert that to a percentage. And that's my CV, or my coefficient of variation. 32.45% variation relative to the mean is what coefficient of variation means. All right, so we found our outliers, we found coefficient of variation. So to compute the outliers for interquartile range, it's based on 1.5 times the interquartile range. Excel has a formula that computes the IQR for us, so we'll start with that. So this is IQR for 5-year return. Put that here, equals IQR, and I just highlight the numbers. And that gives me the interquartile range for 5-year return as a whole. The next thing I need to do is multiply the IQR by 1.5. So equals that times 1.5. So that gives me the size of the interquartile range outside of the third and the first quartile. So the way it works is I draw 1.5 times the interquartile range above the median, above the third quartile and below the first quartile. Let me see if I can draw that in here so that you understand it. So here's my box plot right here. If I go here to draw and draw on here, this is that's quartile 3 and that's quartile 1. All right. And what we're going to do is we're going to take and draw a boundary point. It's probably beyond the boundary point right there. That's going to be 1.5 times IQR below the first quartile and 1.5 times IQR above the third quartile, and then that's where we get our outliers from in our outlier approach to quartile analysis. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So when we do the highlight cell rules, we're going to have to be careful how we do that. So up here we're going to do, let me just move this slightly. We're going to call this the bottom rule and the top rule. So the bottom rule is going to be, you have to compute the first quartile, dot inclusive, for my 5-year return rate. And that's going to be quartile 1 minus my IQR times 1.5. That's going to give me the highlight rule for the bottom quartile outliers. Okay? And so before I move on, I'm just going to make a copy of this because we're going to use a similar equation for the top rule. So Control copy, and then I'll hit enter. so that I can just paste this equation that we had and then modify it, because it's going to be the third quartile plus the interquartile range times 1.5. So that's going to be my top rule. So I've got negative 5.6 and positive 9.6. So now I can highlight my 5-year returns, and like we did with the other example, I'm going to go to the Home tab and Conditional Formatting to highlight greater than cells, and that's going to be greater than, actually I can just click that box right there, greater than 9.618. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing, Conditional Formatting, highlight cells less than, and we want it to be less than the bottom rule, and I'm going to hit OK. And this found, let's see, 1, 2 bottom outliers. So it found 2 outliers on the bottom, and it found 4 outliers on the top. Now I only see 3 outliers up there, but I can definitely tell that all those numbers are included. It's just that some of them are overlapping, so you can't see those dots. So we found the outliers for the quartile range too. So those are the 2 difficult points, I think, is finding the outliers. But other than that, the statistics are very simple. And even the process, once you know it, it's very simple, very quick, and won't take long. Okay? So the last statistics we need are from 3-year return versus 1-year return. So X versus Y. And we need the R square and the R value. So we have correlation and determination. We can also compute the covariance. So I'm going to go through that now. We're going to do R. We're going to do R square. Oops. R square. And we're going to do covariance. Those are some common calculations to explain the scatterplot relationship. So this is going to be equals correlation for R. And we're going to take, this is, remember, this is 3-year return versus 1-year return. So we're going to go over here to the data. We're going to get 1-year return as the first array, comma, and then 3-year return as the second array. So when I'm looking at this calculation, I've got just the data. I'm getting the correlation of those 2 arrays, and that gives me the R square. Okay. Now to save myself some time to highlight, I'm going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to paste this down under covariance. But what I'm going to change is the front part, so it's covariance, and we want covariance.s when we do this. And so I can convert that to covariance, and it's still got the same arrays, and I can calculate the covariance. And lastly, for R square, I can just put a square on the previous calculation to get my R square value. So we found all those statistics, we found all the graphs. The next thing we have to do is just analyze it based on the 4 components of analysis for a set of data. Hopefully that was helpful, and I'll also go through some examples so you can see how this works, so you're comfortable doing this, say, for an exam. All right.